It was 5 years ago today. The single saddest thing in the history of pro wrestling took place. Now, this isn't a video about storyline. This isn't a video about gimmick. This isn't a video which is taking place in the kayfabe world of pro wrestling. This is a story of Chris Benoit. Now, all of you will know what I'm talking about already. But let me just go into it. This was the day that Chris Benoit killed himself. Now, for those of you who weren't watching wrestling at the time when Chris Benoit did what he did, let me just give you his backstory. Or for those of you who were watching and would like to know my thoughts on Chris Benoit, this is it basically. Is that Chris Benoit was practically a hero to me. Chris Benoit was a guy who I really looked up to, somebody who I saw as somebody who stereotypically should never be able to make it in the pro wrestling industry. Maybe as a jobber, maybe as someone to just fill in once every now and then, to come, lose and then go away again. That's what Chris Benoit looked like to the world. However, what Chris Benoit actually was a guy who was dedicated to his craft, dedicated to his hobby, totally passionate about his job, who would do every single thing he could to make sure that he was as good as he could be at what he did. And Chris Benoit became the best in the world. To me, he's the best technical in-ring wrestler of all time. There's no getting past it. My favourite wrestler is Bret Hart. He was a great technical wrestler. He wasn't as good as Benoit was in the middle of that ring. The way Benoit could link moves together, he was so fluid, he was so crisp. He was perfect. He was so intense. The intensity that he brought, he made it look real. He made it look like he was trying to hurt whoever he was in the ring with, and he allowed whoever he was in the ring with to look like they were hurting him. Chris Benoit was exemplary in all assets of his life until the final weekend. Like I said, I really did look up to him. He was an idol to me. He was someone who I looked up to and thought, do you know what? He achieved his goals. He set out in a world where everyone looked at him and said, you know what, you cannot do this. And he said, you know what, fuck off. I'm going to do this and I'm going to be better than you are. And he did, he became it. He even became the WWE World Champion or the World Heavyweight Champion, whatever that title was. You know, they trade him around a lot between Raw and SmackDown. He was the Raw Heavyweight Champion. And Benoit earned it because he was the best at what he does. He was fantastic. And then there was the other part of the story, his wife, Nancy Benoit. I mean, if that wasn't enough, if the fact that Chris Benoit killing himself is not enough, then we have this horrendous part of the story. Nancy Benoit, his wife, Daniel Benoit, his son, were also dead. As a wrestling fan, the conspiracy theories start to roll in your mind. What has happened to this family? How have they died now? At the time, general consensus was that there had been some sort of gas leak or home invasion gone wrong where someone had gone to burgle them. Benoit was there and they'd all end up being killed. Or that there's a gas leak and they'd all ended up dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. Sadly, that wasn't the case. I mean, that would have been horrific in itself. The fact that a family had died, a family of 3 had died, that would have been terrible. But that's not what happened. What happened was that apparently on the Friday night, Chris Benoit killed his wife. And then on the Saturday night, or the Saturday daytime, he killed his son. And then on the Sunday night, he killed himself. Or maybe it was the Monday morning that he killed himself. And then your world is just shattered. You don't know what's going on as a pro wrestling fan. As someone who looked up to Chris Benoit, at the time, this is what, 2007? 5 years ago, I was 18 years old. 18 years old, and my hero has just killed himself and his family. I don't know what to make of that. What's going on? The wrestling fan conspiracy theories start coming about. What about Kevin Sullivan? Kevin Sullivan was Chris Benoit's old boss in WCW. He was the booker over there. He was married to Nancy Sullivan at the time. And he was in a feud with Chris Benoit. So Kevin Sullivan was feuding with Chris Benoit. And he thought to himself, do you know what? A part of the storyline, what would be good, is that if I get my real life wife to turn on me and align herself with Chris Benoit. But then we'll have to work the fans a little bit. We'll have them seen together out in public. And what happened was Kevin Sullivan booked his divorce in real life. In storyline, he made his wife go and hang out with Chris Benoit in public and going out on dates. And they ended up falling in love and being together. So then, rightly so, Kevin Sullivan had a bit of a grudge to bear with Chris Benoit. And when they worked together in WCW, their matches were really stiff and really solid and they used to connect well. And everyone used to be like, whoa, something's going on here. All these years later, though, that was in about 1996. This was 2007. This is about 10 years later. Well, over 10 years later, obviously. Was Kevin Sullivan still jealous? Was it something to do with him? Was he visiting that day? Did he go mental, kill them all? Luckily that wasn't the case, because that would have been even worse, I think. Or would it have been? It's all terrible stuff. Anyway, so what happened was that Benoit killed his wife, killed his son, and then killed himself. And people were wondering why. Why did he do this? Or what had happened? And at the time, Benoit had sent out these mysterious text messages to the likes of Chavo Guerrero, to the likes of Scott Armstrong, who's a referee in the WWE and Road Dogg's brother, and good friends of Chris Benoit. And he texted them all saying, the dogs are in the pool, and random stuff like that. And they were thinking, that's strange, what's wrong with Chris? They tried ringing him, he wasn't answering, so they sent the police around. They informed the police, listen, we've had some strange text messages from our friend and we can't get hold of him, will you please go check him out? And that's when the police broke into his house and found the bodies. Now apparently the bodies were all found with Bibles next to them. I think Daniel Benoit was found in his bed with a Bible next to him. Chris Benoit was found hanging from his weights in his gym. And Nancy Benoit, I don't know where she was found, but apparently she was found with a Bible next to her as well. Now, again, the question's why? Why did they do this now? At the time, it was roid rage. Roid rage, it must have been roid rage. Chris Benoit's this bulked up wrestler. He used to be skinny, he couldn't be this big, he must be on steroids. He was on steroids. So everyone was like, oh, it must be steroid rage, it must be roid rage. It was roid rage, wasn't it? I don't believe so. I don't think it was roid rage, because roid rage is a snap instinct decision, spur of the moment, bam, attack, snap, just break out of it, do something terrible, do something bad, do something you shouldn't be doing. That's what steroid rage is, something that you just do, spur of the moment, and then it's done with. But this wasn't something spur of the moment, this was 3 different acts in 3 different days. This was killing his wife, this was killing his son, and this was killing himself. This was 3 different things. Now, to fully look into it, you can't look at steroids. Well, you have to look at steroids, actually. You have to, but you can't just only look at that. You have to look at the fact that Chris Benoit was a broken down wrestler. Chris Benoit was a depressed man. Chris Benoit had the year before one of his best friends in the industry, Eddie Guerrero, pass away. Now, we all know the storyline version of events that Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, they travelled the world together, they'd fought against each other, and they'd gone to become very good friends. But that was true in real life as well, that the fact that they had travelled the world together, the fact that they were good friends, they came over from WCW together in a pact. Now, to trust somebody else when you're quitting your job, and to trust them to help you get another job is a massive thing, especially when you've got a family to support. So they must have had real trust within each other. Now, another thing you have to look at is his body. Oh no, Biff Wellington as well was his old tag team partner who'd also passed away recently. So this is another person who Chris Benoit was close to, someone who he'd shared moments in his passion, his hobby in the pro wrestling industry with, had also passed away. Chris Benoit was beginning to be a man without his closest friends in the world, who were all passing away before him. He started to find God, he started to find peace, he started to believe that one day he will see these men in a better place. And after he died, Chris Nowinski asked Michael Benoit, who was Chris's father, he asked him, can I have a look at his body? Can I research his body? Can I analyse it? I do research into sports science and I'd like to look into his body. So Michael Benoit said, okay, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if you research my son's body and can tell us something about it. And what he did was he looked at his brain and he found that Chris Benoit had the brain of an 80-year-old man with Alzheimer's. Now, I don't know if any of you have been in contact with people with Alzheimer's, but I have. I've been in contact with a few people. And what it is that when you have Alzheimer's, your perception of reality becomes skewed. You start to believe that you understand that you're you, but you start to believe that you're you from maybe 50 years ago. You might be an 80-year-old man, but you believe that you're 15 again, and that you live with your parents still, and you want to know where your mother is, and all these kind of things, and that you don't recognise people, and like, oh, who's this? So Chris Benoit was a 40-year-old man. A very strong man. He was in fantastic physical shape, but he had Alzheimer's. Now that's a very dangerous combination, because people with Alzheimer's can get upset and angered very easily, especially when they begin to doubt themselves that, wait a minute, I think I'm a 15-year-old boy. Where's my mum? Where is she? I've not seen her for ages, even though you're an 8-year-old man and your mother's passed away 40 years ago. Or whatever the case may be. So Chris Benoit's got this very dangerous mix here in his life, and I think that's what had to do with it. I think that he had some falling out with Nancy Benoit. Now, there was apparent that she'd had a bit of a falling out with Benoit, and that she'd filed divorce papers and stuff like that, and that she'd taken that back and said, you know what, I don't want to divorce you, Chris. And she might have been scared of him. Apparently, her family were a little bit scared for her, that Chris Benoit might be violent, and it turned out to be so. And I think that they had some sort of argument, and Chris Benoit did snap, and it might have been something to do with steroids that he killed his wife. I will say that. But I think it was a lot to do with this Alzheimer's thing, that he wasn't really thinking straight. He was thinking on a different wavelength, where things that shouldn't make sense were starting to make sense to him. Do you know what I mean? And he wasn't really thinking straight. So he killed his wife. Moment of rage. Maybe she wanted to leave him and take the kid with him. And he kills her. Kills her. And he goes on with his day. Then he starts to realise the next day, shit, I'm going to end up going to prison. What about my son Daniel? I don't want him to have to grow up in a world where his father's in prison and his mum's been murdered. So maybe in his mind, he mercifully killed his son so he didn't have to live like that. Which, of course, again, is ridiculous and terrible. It should never have been done. But I think that's how he justified it in his mind. So he kills his son. And the next day when he starts to think to himself, you know, I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to go to prison. He's working out. He's just getting on with his life. Trying to live out his last few moments of freedom. And he realises himself, no, I can't do it. I can't go on. I've killed my wife. I've killed my son. I've got to hang. I can't go on it like this. And he hangs himself. And it's terrible. It's awful. I can't really get my words out here. I can't really fully express how bad I feel, how bad I felt at the time, how bad in hindsight, looking back and really talking about these things, really expressing these things, how awful it all truly is. I mean, it's disgusting. It's something it's straight out of a pro wrestling storyline, isn't it? It's extreme to the max. If this had happened to your next door neighbour, this is an international news story. Man goes crazy, kills his wife, kills his 8-year-old son or 9-year-old son, whatever he was, and kills himself. That's a huge international news story. But now it's Chris Benoit as a pro wrestler. This makes it, just blows it out of proportion. It's a celebrity who's done this. You know, it's just mental. It's crazy. Now the next night on Raw, WWE, knowing that Chris Benoit had been killed, thinking that the family had all been killed together and that it was nothing to do with Benoit himself, they put on a tribute show to him where they basically just showed his DVD of his greatest matches. And I'd already seen it, so I didn't really watch. I watched little bits and then turned it on and off. And then next night on ECW is when we found out. I mean, this is when the WWE, in my estimation, started to lose respect for them. Because what the WWE did then was they started to put distance between them and Chris Benoit. And Vince McMahon came out and he basically said, listen, we now know the truth about Chris Benoit. We now know that he murdered his wife. We apologise for airing what we did last night in that celebration of his life. We apologise that we should never have done that without knowing the facts. But let me tell you that there will never be a mention of his name ever again on our broadcasts. And let's get on with the show. The show must go on. And then ECW did go on, and it was strange also because it did affect pro wrestling storyline continuity, because Vince McMahon had been blown up in a limo the week before on Raw, and there was supposed to be this big story: who blew up Vince's limo? But because they had to do this, and Vince had to publicly come out and basically say that he couldn't go on with this death storyline, a blown up car storyline after this, could he? So he had to just come out and say, do you know what? We made a mistake. And then, that's not what I didn't mind that. What I did mind, however, was how they publicly came out and started saying, oh, we didn't know Chris Benoit was a monster. Starting to make out like he was a monster all along and he was just hiding it. And that to me was disgraceful. Someone who was such a passionate performer for you, someone who was such a dedicated employee, you're just going to shit all over him now. Because he has made a terrible mistake, and you should condemn him for that. But coming out and saying that he was a monster all along and that you've now discovered it, no, that's reprehensible. You should not be coming out and doing that. That's, you know, it's below the belt. It's a cheap shot. I don't know what you guys think of the Chris Benoit thing. Now, I personally, I'm very torn on the matter. He's one of the greatest of all time. People say, should he go in the Hall of Fame? No, he should definitely not go in the Hall of Fame. Chris Benoit's career should not be celebrated, should not be decorated. We should not be talking about Chris Benoit in a positive light any further. The only discussion that's now relevant when it comes to Chris Benoit, unfortunately, is the final moments of his life and a one big overall evaluation. And that's what I'm trying to do here. The respect I had for Chris Benoit, unfortunately, all left that day. I remember going to the park, playing football with my mates and colleagues the next day, and the only way we could deal with it as teenagers was just joke about it. You know, make light of the situation, and just play around, but just to shelter ourselves from the horrible truth that someone we dearly looked up to had committed these awful acts. Now, I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think of the whole Benoit issue? How do you see his career? How do you rate it? What do you guys think about what may have happened on the final days of his life? Do you have some other theories that you might... Is there something that I've not covered in this video that maybe I should have? I tried to get everything into this video. I wanted this one to be one of my best ones. I don't think it is, but, you know. I had recorded this previously, and then I put it on my external hard drive, which broke, so then I had to redo it. That one was a really good video, actually, but yeah. Let me know what you think of the Chris Benoit topic. With that, I'm out. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you very soon with just something different. See you later.